So in today's video, I'm sharing 3 common mistakes that are going to fuel your anger. And it's going to be like a little mini workshop. So get a pen and paper or even your phone and let's get started.
And in this video, you're going to learn how to make healthier choices and actually avoid unhealthy anger. So, the first mistake is not prioritizing self care. The second one is not saying no or setting boundaries. And the third one is when we're harboring hidden hurt and resentment. So, the first one is self care. Self care is not just doing a bubble bath, it's a commitment. It's really the ability to take care of ourselves physically, emotionally, and spiritually without delay. We don't put everyone else's needs ahead of our own. We prioritize our own needs without feeling selfish or self centered. So, consistent self care is going to make it much easier for you to keep your reactions under control because your needs are already met. Now, what happens as a result is when self care is neglected, we end up running on empty. This leads to feeling anxious, overwhelmed, and yes, definitely angry. So, some ideas for self care and ways to improve it. One would be create a daily ritual to center yourself. Wake up 15 minutes early or give yourself some time before bed just to calm and soothe yourself because sometimes we're so busy doing stuff during the day, we don't give ourselves that time. Another way to improve self care is to get consistent exercise or use meditation or tapping to stay calm. There's lots of videos on tapping that can be super helpful. Also, enjoy your own company. Spending time alone, I know as a mom, was a real luxury for me when my son was little. And also, of course, staying in touch with family and friends. So just take a minute to write down where can you improve your self-care. Now, next, we're going to talk about boundaries and how that impacts our anger. So, boundaries are basically limits you set to take care of yourself, and they determine what you will and won't participate in. And boundaries are much more focused about what you do, not changing someone else. So, setting healthy boundaries actually preserves your time and energy. Otherwise, you end up spending your time doing things for other people and neglecting yourself. For instance, how many of you have said yes when you mean no? I have. Say me too in the comments. I'm right there with you. But that is part of what fuels your anger. So, some examples of boundaries you might think about is choosing not to be around someone who drinks a lot or is doing any type of behavior that is upsetting you, walking away when someone treats you badly, speaking up about what's important and how you feel about a situation. Another example is saying no when you need to take care of yourself. So now let's talk about physical boundaries. This is the space that determines how much distance you need in order to feel safe. And when physical boundaries aren't practiced, it's much harder to stay calm. So let's talk about what you need in terms of your physical boundaries. The first thing you need is to decide how much space you need between you and someone else. When and if you feel unsafe, you can either back up or choose to leave. Also, you want to consider being respectful of other people's need for space because sometimes they may need more space than you, and you need to respect that. Another thing I always like to mention is avoid fighting in cars. Because have you ever noticed you start to feel trapped? And it's because it's a space issue. There's nowhere to go. So, honoring your physical boundaries is a really important thing to do when you're trying to manage anger. Emotional boundaries, this is what you do to take care of yourself in your relationships and in difficult situations. And when your emotional boundaries are ignored, it's much harder to stay calm and not react. So, some emotional boundary examples are to remove yourself from a hurtful situation. Don't feel like you have to stay. Say no when it's best for you. It's really okay. That to me was the biggest aha moment I had in setting boundaries is that I was a lot less angry because I was choosing myself. And I finally gave myself permission to do that. Advocate for yourself when needed. Detach from someone else's chaos. You don't need to constantly be helping other people and spending all your energy on them. Often that can contribute to unhealthy anger because we're literally spending all of our energy helping or fixing or trying to prevent someone else's consequences. And it can be really frustrating. Another thing is to refrain from giving advice. Sometimes we step into someone else's problems when we haven't been asked, and that can be a way to avoid frustration and preserve your own energy. Now, when you don't set healthy boundaries for yourself, it's really natural to feel angry and resentful because you're basically putting other people's needs ahead of your own. And I don't want that for you. Now, when you're setting boundaries and it doesn't go well or somebody says no, I want you to create a plan B. This means creating another option to get your own needs met. So it's unfair to actually expect your loved ones to always say yes, because there's going to be times when they're not going to be available. And I don't want your boundary to be dependent on someone else. You are at choice, which is going to help you not feel so powerless. So, some boundaries that minimize anger issues are respecting someone's need for physical space, especially during an argument. That can go a long way in keeping things calm. Respecting someone else's feelings by avoiding things like name calling, making critical comments, saying no when you need to take care of yourself. That's a big one. I've mentioned that already. And being honest about what you can and can't do in your relationships. This is so important because if I'm not honest about what I can do, then I'm going to naturally be mad at myself and it's going to make my relationships more tense. So, being able to say no in your relationships is key because it's going to help you honor what your wants and needs are. It's going to also help you advocate for yourself without feeling like you always have to give in. Saying no preserves your time and your energy. And it also gives you a chance to find other ways of showing support to others, like brainstorming other solutions or just listening and finding other ways to help instead of always saying yes. Also, saying no is huge for maintaining your self care because let's face it, most of us don't have a lot of extra time. And sometimes we need to choose ourselves first, and that's okay. So, some ways to say no nicely is let me get back to you, or here's what will work for me. I can't help you all Sunday, but I can help you for a few hours. Or can I call you back tomorrow? Right now isn't a good time. Or I appreciate your asking, but I can't. Or that's not doable for me right now. Or I can help you find another option. Now, notice that some of these you're actually not answering right away. You're letting them know, hey, I need some time. I'll get back to you tomorrow. Because I don't know about you, but in my recovery, it's really hard for me because I feel obligated to say yes in the moment. But saying no is a way to minimize that unhealthy anger and resentment. And I want to give you permission that you can absolutely say, hey, I need some time here, because that is a healthy behavior that I want you to learn and cultivate. Now, I want you to think about, even pause this video if you need to, what boundaries do you need to start setting? Because that is going to give you your time back. That is going to greatly reduce resentment, which is the next mistake we often make. How I define resentment is it's basically holding on to unresolved hurts from the past. These often are hidden and create separation in our relationships. Now, resentment is a passive aggressive form of anger that hurts you more than the person you resent, because most of the time, the other person has no idea how you feel. And healing old hurt and resentment is going to make it easier to avoid that buildup of anger that resentments create. So when we ignore the hurt, it eventually leaks out in sarcastic or hurtful comments that oftentimes we had no intention of saying. But when you're holding on to that hurt and that anger, eventually it has to go somewhere. And I don't want that for you. It's much better for you to find a direct way to deal with it. Why do we hold on to resentment? Because we get attached to telling that negative version of the story. And over time, that just leads to more and more unhealthy anger because we get attached to being right and expecting an amends or expecting people to notice that we're hurt. And when those things don't happen, that anger just keeps building. So, what I want you to think about is, what resentments are you struggling with right now? This is a great way for you to get really clear on where your work is. Now, if you want more, I want to invite you to my Calming Anger Masterclass on November 24th. There's going to be a replay if you can't make it live. And I'm also giving a special bonus on my Healing Emotional Triggers journal, because this is going to help you get all the tools you need to stay calm and manage difficult emotions. I can't wait to see you there. The link will be in the description. Thanks.